Hello and welcome back to another episode from Tech Life Stories. On the podcast today, I have Greg Riddle. Greg is an experienced IT service operations and IT service management leader. He's progressed his career working within the MSP industry for the past 17 years, currently working for a software house where he's chosen to kind of refresh his career. He has a degree in information technology, some certifications in ITIL and Prince2. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Con. Thanks for having me.
No, not problem at all. Thanks for coming on board. I always like to get started and cracking on with finding out why you got into the crazy world of technology.
Well, that is a very good question. I think there is no particular reason other than, for want of a better phrase, falling into it. So, traditional process of going to university application meetings at school, the sixth form, not knowing what the hell I wanted to do, other than that I wanted to make money and move out of my parents' house as quickly as possible.
Nice.
Which these days is difficult for anybody. But kind of, looked at IT and felt that IT was the sort of direction that most people took if they didn't have a specific path that they were looking to follow, like medicine or science or engineering or things like that. I didn't have a specific idea of what I wanted to do, so therefore IT seemed to be the direction from a university point of view, at least. So ended up in a university in London. So I didn't travel, I didn't move away, which you can either see as a good or a bad thing from an expense point of view. Certainly, I ended up in a university in the city of London, commuting there every day, with a bunch of people that I probably didn't really fall in too well with. There was no like-minded characters there at university that I felt I could relate to. I ended up in a computing degree that was very generic, very obtuse at times, very sort of touched a lot of different areas, but didn't really specialize in one. Struggled through that degree, scraped through in the first year. Really thought it was touch and go as to whether I was going to continue, because I wasn't really engaged with it. Mainly continued due to the cost. I'm not going to lie to you, it was due to cost. Managed to get through, focus and knuckle down a bit, and walked out of there with quite a good degree in the end in terms of certification. I will never forget the conversation I had with our assessor during my thesis period, where we had to do a mix of programming and documentation. So basically, what we had to do is program a game. Do you remember the bat and ball game?
Just two
basic bats and the ball bouncing around.
Yeah.
Had to use programming languages to make that work properly. And then do a documentation piece on the back of it to explain how you market the product. I will never forget the words from my tutor and the assessor at the time. He said it was the worst piece of programming they'd ever seen in their experience, but the best write-up they'd ever seen, which kind of showed me where my skill set lay in terms of the sort of non-technical side of things. So that was kind of how I ended up focusing on IT, and then walked out of IT straight away into an IT job in a city as a junior engineer through a contact that I knew. So it wasn't an application process really. It wasn't a formal structured interview. It was kind of I knew someone and managed to get a role in the city as a junior engineer.
And when you say junior engineer, is that like first line support type thing, or what was it exactly?
So I had no idea what it was going to be. So I turned up first day, suited and booted, told to take my suit off because it wasn't going to be suitable for this role. So it was basically driving around London, fixing hardware for a very small managed service provider. So they had 100 odd contracts with relatively small businesses within the perimeter of the M25, and those contracts were a real variety of different support elements, hardware and software. Not really your traditional full managed service arrangements, just sort of parts of their estate that we supported for them. So whether that be the printer estate or the server estate or the network. So I was thrown in the deep end, pretty much no training. Shadowed another engineer for a day, and then the next day was set out on my own. If I'm honest, that was I really didn't enjoy that period of my career. That was for me. It was a period where I started making the decision in my head as to whether this was the right thing to do, whether I really enjoyed it, whether it was something I wanted to pursue or not.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking back now, we would never. I've worked for our MSPs for 17 odd years up until recently. We would never send an engineer out with the level of training that I received. I was put into some situations that was made me very uncomfortable. It all culminated in me visiting a large insurance company in the city of London to swap out a power supply in a rack, and basically bringing their business down for a day, which wasn't. It was character defining, but it wasn't the most pleasurable experience to start off with. So I quickly managed to maneuver my way out of being an engineer and back to head office to work on different roles there, and that's where I started progressing my career. But I don't think if that hadn't happened, and I had stuck with the engineering or been stuck in the engineering, I don't think it would have been a career in IT that would have lasted very long.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And I'm not sure. To be fair, it was great the employer stuck by you after wiping out the insurance company for a day.
Well, I would say it was probably more their fault than mine.
Okay.
Or maybe 6.5 dozen the other. I mean, I didn't. I'm probably guilty of not having done enough background research on my own before pitching up on site to do the job. But look, we would never. In my career in managed service providers, we would have never have sent engineers out with that level of training. But it was a baptism of fire for me.
Massive learning curve, I can imagine. So you said that you ended up then going in like head office. Is that right?
Yeah. So what was unclear to me at that time was, outside of desktop support or engineering or the technical side of things, what other career avenues are available from an IT perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know I was in a managed service provider, so it was all very heavily focused IT, but this exists in any IT department within any organisation, that there are non-technical career paths as well as technical career paths, and I don't think that this is necessarily explained properly and thoroughly to newbies into the industry and into their IT careers. So I managed to get back to the head office and into the service desk there, performing a more of a service desk role, but it wasn't really a troubleshooting position. It was more of a management of jobs, task allocation out to engineers, customer liaison kind of role.
Mm-hmm.
And because I really sunk my teeth into that and really gave it my all, I kind of I transformed their service desk from being just a basic incident management function to really being quite a strong customer service proposition
Mm-hmm.
for their client base, and quickly moved up the career chain there, into team leader roles, then leadership roles, and then I was probably managing that service desk within their head office within 12 months, which I think was kind of unheard of in that organisation. And that was purely down to graft and hard work, rather than my IT ability, right? So what I started bringing into it, I kept thinking back to this scenario at university where there was no doubt about it, I was the worst technical person there, but probably the one who could explain things the best, right? So I tried to understand what my skills were and bring them into that job. I was never going to profess to be able to fix things, but what I could do was explain things and handle major incidents well for customers, provide post-incident analysis, manage the relationship, the customer relationship, and develop that relationship rather than just purely looking at it as a per ticket experience for the client. So these were principles that I started bringing into that business that hadn't really heard about concepts like service management,
Mm-hmm.
hadn't heard about concepts like customer service really, and I forged a career out of that within that business, and people started to see my skills around that, and kind of created roles off the back of that, and that's how my career kind of grew there.
So, so you're in the organisation. They put you in head office, service desk, and you've done this transition, and it sounds like it's obviously worked out really well. But no one taught you that, right? How did you know what to do, or did you have someone that you could go to get some advice? I mean, how long ago are we talking? Are
I
we
think
talking, it was
we're talking.
was the internet around or not? For you to search stuff up,
I'm not.
mate.
I'm not that old, guy.
All right, come in then.
I might look at it, but no. I think a lot of things I'm talking about here are things that you would now know to be IT service management, right?
Yeah.
The well documented IT service management principles and processes. Um, whether that be from an ITIL perspective or not, right? These things weren't so well known then. And if you deconstruct ITIL now or ITSM, a lot of it just goes back to common sense, in my view, right? You can overcomplicate this stuff. Okay, it's now been categorized into an IT service management framework, and it's been given some aspects of that have been given funky names like knowledge management, for example, or
Yeah.
service transition, or service design, or whatever you want to talk about, right? But fundamentally, they all come down to the basics, right? So I'll give you an example. I talk heavily about knowledge management and the role that knowledge management plays in delivering good service. Well, knowledge management is essentially the strong documentation processes that need to exist in any business, right? To ensure that people have the right instructions at their fingertips to deliver their job, that those instructions are maintained and managed properly, that they're monitored and measured properly. All of those things didn't exist in this organization. We had engineers with knowledge in their heads. So it wasn't hard to identify at that time that one of the things we needed to do was get that documentation put into what you would now call a knowledge base, but then was just called a document repository. So I think, this is where my career has now moved into more of a IT service management focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And specializing around a number of those principles. But back then, it was a lot of it was about just driving some common sense without all the buzzwords.
Okay, interesting. And I think you mentioned that obviously from a technical point of view, when newbies or let's say students at the moment, maybe when they think about career in IT, they are thinking more on the technical element of IT and they're not thinking that there's a non-technical element to IT, right? Especially with the I've got two kids at secondary school, or one's just finished. They're taught very much, from a hands-on point of view. That they're taught coding, and obviously they're taught around, what's in a laptop or PC and around it. But a potential career that's non-techie would have isn't taught to them. Where do you think the breakdown has happened over the years, and how do we overcome that? Because like you managed to forge out a career for yourself because you got your hands dirty and then you managed to get to head office, but not everyone knows that. So what do you think we need to do as a society?
I mean, I think certainly for me, it's probably a lot of the syllabus and course material that's covered certainly in some of these university degrees, but also probably starting right from the IT perspective in schools, right, at GCSE and A level, right, how well the industry application of IT and the different functional parts of a IT organisation are covered. Certainly, in my time, those weren't covered. You covered things like how to build a website, bit of
Yeah,
HTML, bit of SQL, bit of Java, right? And maybe a little bit about e-commerce. E-commerce, you often see a focus on e-commerce, but ultimately that comes down to back to websites and marketing, right? Um, and these days, all the things around affiliate marketing and those sorts of programs is all we hear about is how to make money off Amazon and YouTube, right?
true.
I spent some time with some here in the software house that I work now with a group of school leavers recently who were interested in a career in IT. And every single one of them I spoke to saw that with a silo, from a silo perspective. This is purely a technical proposition, right? This is about getting into some sort of coding capability or website building capability or repairs and maintenance route. And the reality is that actually now in most IT organisations, and certainly the ones that I've worked in, the technical element is actually the tends to be the smaller size teams, right? The larger focus tends to be around the sort of supporting processes from an IT service management perspective to drive good delivery and good process and and certainly here, there are roles and departments that I don't think any of these young people have ever heard about.
Yeah.
And certainly for me, I wasn't aware. I wasn't aware of them either. So I think I looking back now in terms of the degree that I studied, I wouldn't put much value on that. I would have spent more time either doing an apprenticeship in an organisation where I could have understood the structure and understood the possibilities, or done more of a sort of vendor manufacturer specific kind of certification, whether that be project management related or IT related or technical related. If that was what I was interested in, I probably would have invested more time and money doing some sort of specific specialization rather than what I experienced to be quite a general wishy-washy Bachelor of Science degree.
Yeah, well, don't you think, for example, I get where you're coming from, but don't you think, for example, if you, I mean, let's say you went through an apprenticeship, you're starting an apprenticeship at 18, you might think you know what you want, but actually it takes 2 or 3 years and working well to realize actually that's not what I want and it's something else. Could that also be a waste of time doing the apprenticeship as well at that age?
Quite possibly, but I think you would benefit from certainly working in most professional environments is the engagement with other functions, right? That you
Yeah,
wouldn't
true.
necessarily get through just doing a degree or studying, right? Okay, you might come into an IT degree, but an IT apprenticeship, but who are you actually going to engage with in the business environment day to day? You're going to engage with the marketing team, the finance team, the human resources team, etc., etc., etc. And these experiences are valuable for young people, right? To
Mm.
understand how most organisations are structured and what options there are. You're not going to get that from sitting in a classroom. Not that I spent much time in a classroom in university. I ended up doing most of it from home, thinking I could just do it from a book, but doing it from a book because I didn't want to be in those classrooms. But you're not gonna get that insight in those environments.
So apprenticeships are out there now, right?
Yes.
They're out there now. Someone that's leaving college, secondary school, sixth form, whatever you call it. They've got the choice. They can go and do an apprenticeship now or go to university. You'll say, in your opinion, you feel that an apprenticeship would be better for those individuals if they're considering a career in technology.
I mean, obviously, this is different. This is based on personal experience, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
I don't want to be giving that out as blanket advice, and everybody's circumstances is different. But for me, I would have. I feel that I could have probably been 5 years ahead in my career if I had done an apprenticeship
Hmm.
or specialised in a specific set of qualifications. In the 3 years that I was doing um, a computing and information systems degree, I probably could have done 12 Microsoft exams or more. Right, I could have probably done a whole set of Cisco qualifications, specialise in networking, or I could have gone and done an apprenticeship and got my foot into a business and practically experienced a professional environment and glean some insights that I would never have got at university. So, you know, I suppose if you positioned that question to me and said, how would I advise my son and my daughter about what to do when they got to that age? Carl, this is not because I'm trying to save money here, right? Because I'd have to pay for them to go to university. Because I mean, that's a whole different kettle of fish these days, right? But you know, I walked out of university and it cost £3,500 from start to finish. You know, significant investment these days. You're paying off
Very
for
much so.
many years, right? But I would be saying to my son or daughter, from personal experience, don't do it. And certainly, you know, it's an expensive way to to learn that you don't want to do something.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. But I think it goes back. I think you mentioned as well, unless you know what you want to specialize in. So, for example, if you know, for example, you want to specialize in,
Yeah,
you know, big data, and there's you know, there are degrees that are relative to big data, then maybe that's a good specific one. Whereas I get what you're saying about your one; it was quite generalist. So,
I mean, if you're talking about
yeah,
law or medicine, right, doctoring, right, you know, there are quite clear career paths there, right? Sorry, career training routes, right, and things that you need to do. And university plays an important role. From what I've seen, not so much in IT.
hmm. Do you think, like you say, obviously, schools could be doing more from a GCSE point of view or the syllabus point of view? Do you think maybe individuals, you know, at that age, maybe should be trying to get a little bit more work experience, you know, work and seeing what it's like working in these type of departments and the tech department and the non-tech area of IT as well? Do you think that would help?
I mean, obviously, you know, work experience starts a lot earlier in school, right? And again, my work experience, was it applicable? No, you know, I think if we all think back to work experience that we did, you know, at our age, um, work experience was a few days out of school, wasn't it? Right? It wasn't really, it
I went
wasn't
to the
really,
retail shop. I did nothing in a retail shop.
yeah. Well, I did. I was. We were collecting taxes with the tax office. It wasn't the most pleasurable experience that
Yeah.
I've ever experienced. But um, you know, yes, is the answer to your question. I think that there could be far more insights provided from a work experience point of view at school in the lead up to, um, to you know, A levels and sixth form and then university decisions. And then from a syllabus point of view, you know, I haven't seen the syllabus, the GCSE syllabuses and A level syllabuses for some time. But speaking to the students here recently, those syllabuses aren't really providing much insight into the industry or the commercial structure um, behind all of this. Right, it is they're still focusing on very specific elements.
Mm.
Um, you know, like website programming or application programming now, apps. So, you know, and it's not necessarily providing, I don't think, a realistic insight into how a traditional or IT org is structured. You know, and having moved around and I worked recently, and having worked with quite a lot of IT or IT departments through my managed service background, you know, most IT departments tend to have the similar backbone in terms of departments and structure. Obviously, they're working against different backdrops, and you know, slightly different cultures, but essentially the structure of their IT service management departments tend to be very similar. Their technical departments tend to be very similar. Service desk, engineering, first and second and third line, they tend to be very, very similar. These things aren't. They're not. They're not. They're not known about and explained well enough. And going back to the first business I worked in, it wasn't until I got back to head office. If I had been continually stuck out as a field-based IT engineer, I would never have understood what was going on behind the scenes to keep that IT organisation running. So yeah, I think the insights given to young people around the reality of IT organisations could be far better.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's good. Let's go back to the career. So you're working in the organisation. You've done really well. You've progressed the service desk. What's the next step for you?
So from there, I moved into service delivery management and started looking after key accounts, managing the relationship between customer and IT delivery engine, ensuring successful outcomes. For this organisation that I was working at for at the time, kind of defined their approach to service management from both the relationship point of view, but then all the metrics and reporting that sat behind it. My personal experiences around in my career was that I was really with the same business for 17 years, but it was acquired many times during that journey, and therefore felt like a different business every few years because it was acquired by someone else, which meant that we had to continually educate and adapt to the new incoming acquirer. So I then moved away from service delivery management and started creating service transition and service design departments. So, and this is all aligned with when ITSM grew and ITIL became more prevalent. Those functions became better understood, and I've been in a place where I've been basically setting up departments to align with how ITIL has progressed and developed. So I created service design, service transition departments, embedded them into businesses, grew teams, hired people, trained people on how to become the service designers, service transition managers. My career then went full circle, and I went very much back to the operational side of things and took over service desks again, first through to second and third line operations, network operating centers, managing remote monitoring departments, remote monitoring and management departments, engineers and field-based services. It culminated a few years ago in me looking after an organisation of around 400 IT-based delivery personnel, whether they be service desk people or field-based staff or technical support engineers within our network operating center. And then up until recently, I was still creating new departments and functions to align with the way that ITSM sees the world. So the most recent example of that probably was the creation of a continual service improvement department that was inward looking. So whereas most of the focus is up until relatively recently have all been about customer relationship management and service delivery management to the outside and to the external customer, you can often neglect that inward facing analytical viewpoint, right? Making sure that you are holding yourself to account, that you are treating yourself as a customer. That concept obviously flies around quite a lot these days about treating yourself the way you treat any customer, and holding yourself to those same accountability and standards. So I created a department of, in excess of 10 people looking internally, purely internally, quality assuring the work that we were delivering, undertaking proactive service improvement projects, analysing escalations and complaints, and just driving that approach to continual development of our service.
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. You mentioned you're with the MSP for 17 years, even though it had been acquired a couple of times. So it felt new some of the times. I mean, how many different roles did you have across the 17 years?
Um, it's hard, it's hard
Quite a few?
to hard to keep account of. I mean, I've moved around a lot, and you can pretty much say that across the ITIL spectrum and value chain now, if you're talking from an ITIL 4 point of view, pretty much every function within ITIL I've looked after,
Mm-hmm.
and at any given time, probably more than 3 or 4 of them in tandem, right? So I would say probably in excess of 20 roles, right from the sort of junior positions in these MSPs, right up to my last previous role was heading up service operations,
Yeah.
and looking after pretty much everything from a service center point of view that was delivered to our contracted customers. So a whole lot of roles, a whole lot of responsibility. You know, I've worked with lots of different people, lots of different teams, to driving people to develop their careers. You know, there's nothing more that I've enjoyed through that process of hiring internal talent as well as external talent and seeing them progress their careers. You know, junior type people from service desk kind of roles into fully fledged project managers, transition managers, service designers, you name it. I've worked with those people behind the scenes to develop their careers, and these people are far better at the job than I ever was. But what I can give them is good direction and instruction on what to focus on and what not to worry too much about.
Okay, it's good. I like it when I hear people say they enjoy it when they help people progress their careers. That's good. And I remember in our pre-call, you saying to me something along the lines of you hire based on character and not tech skills. Can you just elaborate a little bit for me on that? Because I think a lot of people listening will, some of the more junior individuals will think that maybe tech skills is probably needed, but speaking to not just you, but some of the other individuals I've had on the podcast recently, a lot of them do say that the character of the individual is as key, if not number one. Tell me your thoughts and process on that, please.
I mean, certainly from the sort of non-technical roles point of view, I never look for professional qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not. When I look at a CV, I never really focus on that last quarter of the document, which is where the professional qualifications are stored. My conversations with candidates tend to be typically be decided within the first 15 minutes of interaction, based on whether we can keep a conversation flowing and whether the enthusiasm is there and the energy and the charisma and the attitude looks right. Because ultimately, you can train people to be to follow a process or to undertake a certain job or complete tasks a certain way, and certainly from a technical point of view, you can train people to fix hardware and fix software or whatever it might be, right? You cannot train someone to possess the right attitude and right approach to their work. So I would much rather have someone join me these days where I am as a service designer or a knowledge manager or a change manager with desire and energy to undertake the role and enthusiasm, rather than someone who's done change management or knowledge management, for example, for 20 years and can talk me under the table on it until I'm asleep. And it wouldn't take that long either, because it probably would, those sorts of subjects bore me to death after about two minutes, right? Ultimately, I don't want to know the ins and outs of the process from someone. I want to know that someone is engaging with the rest of the business properly, is being received well by the rest of the business, is good at communicating, is good at providing updates, is good at infusing others around them. Right.
Mm.
I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for people who just understand process. So ultimately, yes, is the answer to that. I always focus on attitude over anything else. Now, look, there are obviously some exceptions to that. You cannot get away from some of those really high-end technical roles where certain certifications or accreditations are needed. In an MSP environment, that's often from a compliance point of view that you need those people with those skills, and they're valuable. They can be valuable from a technical point of view, but certainly from an ITSM standpoint and sort of the non-technical roles, I always, I would rather, if I was looking for a someone to come in and build out a vision I have for change management, I would rather take someone who serves me in Pizza Express, who's got the most unbelievable customer service attitude, versus someone I interview who can tell me they've done change management FTSE 100 customers, right, and but won't be able to adapt to our business, right, and won't be able to infuse others.
It's good. I like it. I like the Pizza Express analogy. Anyone listening that works for Pizza Express might be approaching you
This is
saying, "Greg,
this is mainly because I do have someone in mind here, right? It's very, very, very. It was very, very good customer service every time I take my kids into Pizza Express. But yeah, I just see it. That's the way I see the world.
that's good. I like it." And you mentioned that the techies, and if you were recruiting for a very heavy technical role, that obviously their certifications and the tech skills are paramount. What happens in that circumstance where you're not necessarily finding the right character or the right cultural fit? They are very, very technical focused. That must happen sometimes to you. And how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously has happened in the past, and inevitably it causes issues, right?
Yeah.
And what I would say that are difficult to recover from, right? And these are not issues that only exist for me as a hiring manager or the business that I operate in, but then they will exist for the individual who joins, who possesses the mismatch in cultural fit, right? They won't be happy in that organisation for too long, right? And I've seen it. I've seen some high power, heavy hitting technical people join based on the fact that we've needed them for a particular contract or a particular customer engagement, or to tick a compliance box, certification box somewhere along the line. An MSP, anyone who's listening to this who from an MSP background will know well that to maintain badges from a vendor viewpoint, you often need to have a certain level of accreditations in your business and
Mm.
available to your client base. I have been guilty in the past of hiring people quickly to tick a box, right? And that falling down relatively quickly too, when there is a cultural mismatch. So what I would say is that there are always commercial pressures to be able to meet these requirements, and sometimes it's not always possible to do this. But if there is the possibility to take your time and spend a bit more focus on that whole cultural piece, then save yourself a headache 6 months down the line when you need to redo it again
Yeah.
because it was all falling apart because the cultural fit wasn't there from day one. That for me is key.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. I think everyone that I talk to would say exactly the same as you. But I think, like you say, sometimes you've got time pressures, commercial pressures, that you are pushed into making a decision that that you might end up regretting, but you can't help it, right?
Yeah,
That's the nature of business. I get it. So you've done 17 years in the MSP world. You're now working for a software house. Very different.
massively different, very difficult to adapt to. So
Talk me through it. I'm
just
intrigued by this actually.
yeah, so the story behind that was um, I needed a change. I was looking back now. So I left The same business that I worked with for 17 years, albeit, as I said, it felt like different businesses every
Yeah.
5 or 6 years because it was acquired for a variety of times. I left there ultimately last year because I felt I had, for want of a better phrase, hit the glass roof, right? There wasn't, I couldn't progress. There's always self-reflection involved in any situation like that. I had definitely stagnated there. So over the last 2 years, I had become very stale in terms of development and enthusiasm for the organisation I worked for. That wasn't good for myself. Wasn't good for anyone around me. So I had an opportunity to leave last year, which I seized. Within a week of doing so, but to be perfectly honest, before that point, I had already lined up this opportunity and known about it. So I was in the advantageous position of having the whole of last summer to recharge my batteries, knowing I had taken a voluntary redundancy and had got a new position lined up for the autumn. I cannot emphasize enough how, having left university at 21 and started that job in that MSP the next day pretty much, and then not had a career break until I was 39, how badly I needed that. Not just for my, I'm not someone who is probably, I want to phrase this the right way. I probably don't take mental health seriously enough when it comes to myself, but those 3 or 4 months last summer re-energized me and allowed me to ready myself for my next career step. So I've moved to a software house that has got a unique culture, I think, even within the industry that it works in. It took me a while to adapt because I knew about my previous business, inside out pretty much. I lived, slept, and ate that business, and it was extremely scary, very daunting. Coming somewhere new, not knowing. I only knew one person here, but not really knowing anyone, and having to learn again. I have delivered in the last 9 months what I would say, and hopefully others here will say, probably the best quality pieces of work I've delivered in the whole of my career, because I am re-energized, and because I am outside of my comfort zone. And that was a massive decision to make on. It probably wasn't as hard a decision that if I hadn't had the option to leave, right? If I hadn't had that option hadn't arisen, I would probably still be just sitting in my previous employment, stagnated, and not done anything about it. So this was the kick I needed to do something, and it was the best decision that I could have ever made.
Yeah, and look, I appreciate you being honest about stagnating and being stale and your development and needing to recharge the batteries. Some people, and actually being honest about not taking your mental health serious for yourself. I think there's a lot of people that are in your situation. And, it's good to sometimes let it out and talk about it. And I was with my first recruitment company for 10 years, and the last couple of years, like you, quite stale. I wasn't developing. And it wasn't until I left that I was completely refreshed, re-energized, new impetus, new way of working, new culture. That helps you as an individual and your mental health. And I took I think I took 3 months out before I took that. I started that job, and it does. It makes a big difference when you refresh yourself. So I suppose you mentioned you're having to learn again. Is that learn the way you work, or learn a different culture, or a bit of both? What else does that include when you're having to learn again?
So I think there's a number of things, right? So I'm working here with some people who really understand IT and IT service management specifically. Um, some people who view it differently to people I've worked with before. Some people who don't understand it because it's not their area of expertise, and they're focused on a different different things here, such as software development, right, and gaming and stuff and things like that, right.
Mhm.
The reality is that I I've had to I've had to adapt to different cultures, to different ways of working, but specifically for me, just a different a different outlook um, on IT, right? Different focuses on what is important and what isn't important. So, um, it's been it's been eye opening for me, right? I have become trapped in a singular way of looking at things, um, whereas in a different industry and in a different culture, um, there are different interpretations of the same thing. All right.
Mhm.
And it made me understand that not necessarily, even though I was working in a managed service provider, you would think would know the best ways of doing everything, they are not necessarily the best ways of doing everything. So there was a self appreciation point where I had to understand that actually um, my ways weren't necessarily the best ways. They're
Mhm.
not going to fit every other organization. But just going back to the industry point of view and working in a different sector, what I would say as well, I spent 17 years in the same sector, and it makes you very silo focused, right? Very insular in terms of your experiences, life experiences, commercial understandings. I encourage anyone to move cross sector, even if you're still staying within your expertise. It might be IT, it might be finance, it might be HR. Moving cross sector get is reinvigorating.
Mhm. I think it's really interesting what you just said there, because from a recruiter's point of view, and obviously, I run my own recruitment agency. When most of our clients will want sector focused backgrounds, right? If I've got a financial services client, I want someone to come from financial services background. So hearing you say it's good for someone to reinvigorate themselves switching sector is good. I agree with you actually, but it also goes against what some clients want in sector specific industry backgrounds. To get where I'm coming from.
But yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from, because when I started recruiting various ITSM based roles here, I asked for managed service provider backgrounds, right? Because I thought these are people that will understand the way I explain things. And
Mm.
these are the people, these people will know it best because they've worked for MSPs. Have I hired one MSP related person or person with an MSP background since I've been here? No. Why? Because they wouldn't fit in here,
Mm.
right? They would not fit in here. And I've had to, the, the contact that I knew before I moved in here was very clear to me that it's a different culture, it's a different way of doing things, and I know, while I appreciate that, I don't think I took it seriously enough. Um, now I think one of my skills is adapting. Right? One of my skills is communicating and empathizing with people, and um, and just be able to fit in. which I didn't know that skill was necessarily that good until I moved career and moved industry, right? But I certainly, so luckily for me, because a lot of the recruiting I've been doing is in Europe, there hasn't been really an abundance of available skills with managed service provider experience, which forced me into a place where I had to hire both outside the industry and also both outside the experience that I would have, initially liked. But those hires have been far more successful than I could have ever envisaged, because I focus purely on the interview process on cultural fit, and they have also picked up the processes and very, 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 very quickly. So, there's going to be examples where you can't move outside of the industry, specific industry sectors, right? In medicine and law, for example, right? But certainly here, when I talked earlier about ITSM and a lot of it being down to common sense, right? There's a lot of fancy terminology when it comes to ITSM. You can overcomplicate it if you want to. A lot of the diagrams that exist out there from an ITIL point of view, I think certainly from an ITIL version 3 point of view, maybe less so of ITIL version 4, but still to some extent, I think it's made to look complicated on purpose. This is some sort of secret of how to deliver good IT service governance. It isn't. It's common sense. It's how to do all the things you would do in your everyday way of life, at home, with your kids, with your family, right? You just bring it into the workplace and deliver IT against it, right? If you want to be an organised person at home, you organise all your paperwork, don't you? You make sure you've got your mortgage documents together, you've got all your energy bills together, you've got everything together, or you've got it stored online, right? So that when you come up for your insurance renewal, you're like, who am I insured with? Like, I can't remember who does my home insurance, who does my car insurance. Let's dig that out. Let's try and find the email from a year ago. If you're that, it's the same with knowledge management, right? So, from making sure that stuff is organized and you can find it easily, right? And it is of use when you need it to be of use, right? And it is giving you value, right? If I'm hiring for a knowledge manager, am I going to hire a I'm trying to find the right expression here, someone who's a little bit all over the place, right? Versus someone who's very organized. I'm going to be looking for an organized person. It's as simple as that. So I probably took gone off on a complete tangent here, but essentially for me, this all comes down to common sense, and that's the skills I look for.
That's good. It's good. It's been interesting hearing, obviously, you cross sector and being reinvigorated by the change, and there are lots of people probably listening at the moment that have probably been in very similar shoes to you. Same sector, that's all they know. Probably scared to try something new, or applying for jobs in the same sector and not thinking about changing sector. Like, what advice would you give them? Like, I know you're saying obviously you'd be feeling reinvigorated, but if you were in their shoes, once upon a time. So, what advice would you give them to change?
Well, certainly for me, it might be hard to make those direct applications into other businesses, but certainly if you're working with a recruitment agent, is to emphasize your desires and reasons behind your desire to broaden your horizons into different industry sectors and what you can bring to that role from a human traits perspective, right? In the majority of conversations I have with recruitment agents, is looking for someone who's going to be the right fit, because as we said earlier, you cannot program that, and I think people are starting to hiring managers are beginning to understand more and more the expense, but not just the expense. Well, the expense is considerable so often when it comes to recruitment. If you don't get a refund, right? But essentially, the impact on your business if you are continually going through recruitment cycles, right? So for me, when I have the conversation with recruitment agents now, it is about finding the right cultural fit, the right person for the role, rather than the right skills for the role. Again, it's not always going to be the case, but I would encourage any candidate to impress upon their recruitment agent they're working with their desire to broaden their horizons and their personal strengths and traits that they can bring to any role, right? And let the recruitment agent do some work with that, right? To try and encourage a hiring manager to give that person that candidate an option, right? An opportunity to apply for the role. For me, they tend to be the majority of the conversations I have with any agency is getting me the right fit.
Mm-hmm. It's good. I wish more of my clients were like that. Some of them just focus on tech too much and not enough on culture. So it's good to hear it's very culture focused where you are. Look, we're coming to the end now. I always like to just. I've got a couple of questions I always end off, but one of them is just from a ITSM point of view. Like, where do you see the future of it? Are there any changes you foresee coming up? It'd be interesting to hear your kind of like thoughts on that.
I think from my perspective, it's about simplicity, but it's also about it's always been about and should always be about using parts of frameworks that offer value, right, and not trying to implement an entire framework that may not necessarily meet your business requirements. A lot of what is spoken about around ITSM and ITIL at the moment is about human-centered design and about making sure that it drives benefit to end users. For me, it's always been about taking the aspects of it that drive benefit in your business, right? In some businesses, that's different to others.
Okay, good. And just to kind of find a little bit more about you, your personal life. I've heard all about your work, but personal life, what'd you get up to? Hobbies, family?
Well, as any parent will tell you of young children, life goes on hold. Didn't think it would be on hold for this long, but it's my my life can kind of be summed up by the types of holidays I now take versus the holidays I used to take. So these are family focused holidays, family focused activities, early evenings, so that you can recover for the next day. So my life tends to just be about family life these days, and trying to get as much sleep as possible. And hopefully life will come back at some point. I'm starting to think I left it a little bit too late now. I had a lot of friends that in their early 20s who had children, and I thought, what have you done? But I think they might have been smarter than me. I've got two kids, so yeah, I've got a little boy who's turning 5 in September, and a little girl who'll be turning 2 in October.
Lovely.
And they are very expensive and very and hard work, but yeah, it wouldn't change them for the world, would you? So
No, you wouldn't.
yeah.
And I sympathise with you around what you said there around the holidays and the different activities. I've got 3. I know what it's like. So, yes, they are expensive. I hate to tell you this, but it gets worse. It gets even more expensive. My oldest is just about to go to university. I know you don't approve of university, but he's going. But yeah, it's very, very expensive out there in the world at the moment.
The question is who's paying?
Well, student loan and me.
Yeah.
And he's been saving, he's been working. So fair play to him for working and putting some money aside as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah, 100%. But listen, that is the end now. Really appreciate you sharing your career background, your insights. I've loved hearing everything around, your thought process around, when you was at university and apprenticeships and your process of when you've recruited people, and just hearing your honesty around recharging of batteries and self-reflection, stagnation. I think they're really, really key topics that people want to hear about, really. So thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Absolutely, and I hope that people can take and reviewing this can take some. If they're feeling worried about making a career change, I was feeling worried too, and this it has been the most reinvigorating part of my career, I would
Yeah.
say. And I think there's the only final thing I would add as well is and I've seen this a lot on with social media recently, and I've detached from social media as much as I can of late because I don't think it's good for anyone from a mental health point of view. But I see a lot of videos flying around about trying to remake the norm. Okay, so people's 9 to 5, right? I think has been tarred with 9 to 5 jobs have been tarred with this brush that you should be doing more. You should be running your own business. You should be investing in the market. You should be a millionaire by the time you're 30. You should be X, Y, and Z, right? Whether that be one influencer or another, putting this false illusion out there that you are not, especially as a young men, right? Especially, as young men should be hitting certain milestones by certain ages. I think it is perfectly acceptable and perfectly possible to be happy and fulfilled with a 9 to 5 that that allows you to balance your personal and your professional life. We've all worked in environments where they talk about the work-life balance, right? For me, I feel like I've got the work-life balance right, and that was by making that move,
Yeah.
and justifies me doing it. So, I just thought that was I'd like to say that.
No, that's good. I think there's a lot of people who echo your thoughts on social media, and I think there is a lot of uh, unnecessary influencing going out. But I suppose it depends on the individual that's being influenced and how strong they are. And there are some individuals that can look past it. There are some that will fall for those kind of. I'm not going to call them scams, but the influence that's happening. So I get where you're coming from. But yeah, like you, I think you get to a certain maybe stage in your life where I detach myself a little bit from that. A bit too much goes on, and like you say, nothing wrong with a 9 to 5 job. I agree with you there. But yeah, great. Thank you very much. I hope to have you on in the future.
Thanks, Colin.
No problem at all, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Just thanks,
See you
Colin.
later. Bye bye. Bye.